Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explainer series. I am Kushagra Goel and very warm greetings from Law Prep Tutorial. Now, I hope once again that all of you are taking all the necessary precautions and all your family members' health is also fine. That during these tough times, you are together with each other and your family members are taking good care of your health, doing proning, doing normal exercises for half an hour just to keep yourself in a better state of mind. Remember that, while you're at home, physical exercises or half an hour of breathing exercises is not just good for your mental health, but also keeps toxins that we develop in our bodies away. So make sure that you're doing that. Now, a lot of you had doubts about the date of the examination and how, and I know that there is a lot of anxiety because last year the exam was postponed multiple times. Even this year they have postponed it once, plus the date of examination of registration has been extended. So the consortium has repeatedly told that they will keep a stock of the events and based on that they will determine the date. As of now, the date of the examination remains June 13. We will also update you whenever a new notification comes into light. But as of now, you should focus on the date as it is and make sure that you are preparing based on that timeline itself. A follow-up question to that comes that till then, how many days you should study for the examination? Now, it is correct that last year you did get one passage from a very niche newspaper. That was one event. Majority of the paper featured events prior to that time period. So should you work for 5 to 10 marks and forget and invest that much time, leaving apart 140 marks of paper, I believe that strategy is wrong. You can the series will continue. So for all those who want to keep a tap on those extra 5 to 10 marks, you can every day just watch for half an hour the video as part of your daily routine while focusing your majority of the time for revision of what all you have till now studied. All right, don't focus too much on nitty-gritties ki ek passage last year recent से आया था, तो you'll keep on spending too much time on acquiring new knowledge. Retention is more important than acquiring new knowledge, and that is why my emphasis is right now your strategy should be focused on finalizing, perfecting the skills that you already know, perfecting the topics you already know. In that regard, there was another question ki there are certain events which have been which may not have very recent updates, but are or have been happening for a long time. For example, Israel-Palestine. But if you are forgetting, even this year, multiple countries have normalized relationship with Israel. So it is not something that has happened only historically. Events on that crisis have been happening regularly. Therefore, you cannot ignore crisis of international importance. Israel has been in the center of India relationship also. You should also not forget that we talked about Pegasus, a lot of surveillance security softwares and that technology coming from Israel. So therefore, Israel as a country and issues surrounding it have been part of recent current affairs events for the past 6-7 months. So you cannot ignore it. You should not ignore crisis of international importance. Therefore, we have been regularly discussing all of them, right? So thus do not ignore those based on कि नहीं अभी तो इसमें कुछ ज़्यादा important update नहीं आया है. That things that are of real international importance, it is part of huge international affairs importance. So don't discount such things, all right? Then another thing was related to how to improve your performance in mock tests and in general for current affairs and GK. So if your scores in mock test are not improving, my suggestion are twofold. One, probably you're not focusing on the details enough. You're not reading the questions properly, or you're not looking in the way where the passage wants to take you. You may have information, but how it is asked in the question, that becomes important. And secondly, if a mock test that you're giving has information that you may not have studied. Mock test is not a direct representative of how you will score in the examination, okay? Especially in the GK section. independent, if you're good enough and if your luck is good enough, you may get the same passage that you practiced in a mock test. If that doesn't happen, it is completely okay, right? What you have to focus on in mock test, even if your score is not improving in general knowledge, use the questions of mock test as part of your syllabus. Add them. Things that you do not know, things you had not noted down, add it to your notes. So that the purpose of mock test and the entire preparation is that you should not get it wrong in the examination. If you get it wrong in the mock test, it is completely okay. No one is going to ask you 2 years down the line, how many marks did you score in the mock test? No one in CLAT is going to judge you on basis of how much you were scoring in mock test. No one is going to determine your rank based on how many mocks you gave, at what coaching you gave, whether you got 10 coaching mock tests. कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. You should just focus. See, the purpose is, ये मेरे पास पहले आया था क्वेश्चन एग्जाम में, आई डोंट हैव टू गेट इट रॉन्ग. पहले मुझे पता था, ये मैंने देखा था क्वेश्चन. द पर्पज इज कि तुम्हें वो एग्जाम में गलत नहीं करना है. एग्जाम इज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग. मॉक्स में जो होता है कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. जस्ट टेक इट इन योर स्ट्राइड. मॉक टेस्ट आर फॉर यू टू प्रैक्टिस. They are for you to hone your skills, improve them, sharpen them. They are not part of determining your CLAT rank. They do not determine your CLAT rank. They may determine how much speed you're reading passages with, how much you have got a grasp over a certain topic. It does not determine your CLAT rank. So don't stress about scoring less in a particular mock or not. Completely all right. Now, one more important question that a lot of students have asked is about breach of the 50% bracket of reservation. Very genuine question. That, see, there have been other places where reservation has been breached. For example, the EWS quota, economically weaker section of quota. Now, that is also matter is before the Supreme Court. Similarly, reservation in different areas of public employment in different places is also reserved for different categories, and that has been challenged. Now we need to wait for the court to determine whether that is the case. What we know till now is the court has stressed that the principle of reservation should not stretch beyond 50%. That is the bottom line the court has said. Now whether it believes, remember that even in this judgment, the court has stated that, see, in case there are exceptional circumstances that the state is able to prove, then reservation can extend beyond 50%. But till then, unless exceptional circumstances are established, that cannot be the case. So 50% is the threshold. In exceptional circumstances, it can be breached. So the onus is on the state to prove that exceptional circumstances exist for it to move beyond 50%. But we need to wait for the court to determine whether that is the case or not. We may speculate, yes, there are states that provide for more. We need the court to determine. I cannot make a remark on that, and you should not. The one thing that you should know, 50% can be breached if the state proves to the court exceptional circumstances exist. That's all. Then another question that students also had, sir, in IPR, how products or process patent register themselves for patent? What is the data exclusively? What is data exclusively? Give some examples. Now, what I can understand from this doubt is someone is asking examples of process and product patents. Now, for example, toothbrush or toothpaste. Now, a lot of toothpaste are fluoride based, right? Similarly, a lot of toothbrush have crisscross bristles, plastic base. So if, for example, one company had patented the product toothpaste or toothbrush, then no one else would have been able to make, but everyone makes it differently. And so even they can claim their product is also different or their process may be different, right? So therefore, different companies can get patent over different products and processes. Okay, so you can look at it at any point of time. You need to apply for patent and then the government determines how and what is the process. Okay, then another question, sir, central government can determine or reserve category or the president? See, the president acts on aid and advice given to him by the Council of Ministers. Who heads the Council of Ministers? The central government, right? So therefore, whatever the president decides, is something that the central government only advises. In recent time period, at least since 2014, we have not seen a single incident of president deciding otherwise than what the government has suggested. Even for example, in farm laws, so many protests were happening. The president could have kept the bill in abeyance, but that did not happen. So the law is, if a question comes, you will claim the president determines. But for general understanding, you need to know president decides on whose advice. The advice of Council of Ministers. And who is the Council of Ministers? It is the central government. So if a question comes, you will claim that the answer is the president, okay? Because the section of the constitution reads the president. But actually, for your understanding, you should know, and in real life, the president is basically a rubber stamp of the central government. So it is the central government who has the real power to determine, okay? Now, is there a difference between a shareholder and a broker? Yes, there is a difference between a shareholder and a broker. Okay, shareholders are those who actually have the holding in a company. A broker is someone who may assist you to actually purchase that shareholding. So let's say I got a friend, Mayank, who is a broker. I say ki IDBI bank is getting disinvested. I want to invest in it. Okay, or I want to purchase shareholding in that. So he helps me purchase those shares in that company. So I am a shareholder, he is a broker. Okay, so that is how it is determined. Now, another question was, do you need to remember the 12 members of the task force? I know those kinds of questions are never asked, but there is no harm in just keeping a note of them. All right, ki ek baar you should go through them, have a note of those 12 members. All right. Then another question is Israel and Palestine different nations? As per resolution 181 of UNO, they were supposed to be two different nations, but after the two wars that Israel has fought, it has captured the territories that were supposed to be Palestine. So Israel is occupying the areas that were supposed to be the independent country of Palestine. So they are two different nations, and therefore we keep seeing the news of them being illegally occupying the areas of Palestine. Okay. So moving on to today's newspaper analysis, the front page has one news that the turncoat from the Indian National Congress, Himant Biswa Sarma, has now been declared to be the next Assam Chief Minister. So he will be taking over from the incumbent Chief Minister, that is in the picture you can see Sarbandana Sonowal, who is from the BJP. So he will be sworn as the 15th Chief Minister of the state of Assam. So that is the decision the BJP has taken. Turncoat from the Congress party, he is seen as the most important leader of the BJP in the Northeast, and he will now take over as the next Chief Minister of Assam. Apart from that, on the front page, Delhi has extended its lockdown till May 17. More and more states are implementing lockdowns. And at the same time, Labour Minister, Cabinet Minister Santosh Kumar Gangwar has been unhappy with UP's COVID-19 response. Then more and more places about COVID-19 relief in general. And the troubles they are facing, oxygen shortage is still there. People are still running around for oxygen cylinders. There is the vaccination pace of India has been very, very slow. In that regard, more and more NGOs are coming up for the fight against COVID-19. Then on the editorial page, so keeping up with the more important topic that has been in news is about the TRIPS waiver. The first editorial, continuity of Dravidianist electoral dominance. This is about the two main Dravidian political parties of Tamil Nadu, that is DMK and AIDMK, and they have come across one as the ruler and the other as the main opposition party. Alternatively, power has been shared between them. The last party to have outright majority on its own was the Congress party, who have not taken majority in the state since the decades of 1960s. Then on the left hand side, lockdown gains, that lockdowns are only useful if the state uses the time period of the lockdown to actually ramp up sustainable medical facilities that have been collapsing. So in general, India has a low medical infrastructure, and additionally that has come under increasing strain. The lockdowns are basically a recognition that the system has become overwhelmed and we need alternative support system to be ramped up. So lockdowns will not be effective if we don't increase that. Then on the left hand side, outreach and overreach. So this is a lot of criticism have come into Supreme Court for establishing this medical expert member panel group for oxygen. But what can the court do when the central government has not been coming up with any plans actually to resolve the conflict? People have been realizing that, see, the executive has completely failed, and thus to protect their life, which is a fundamental right that the state should be owning up, which the state has not been doing and has thus turned to the judiciary. Now, it may blur the lines between the executive and the judiciary, but in case the executive vacates its position, someone else has to do it, right? So thus the action to mitigate a crisis is welcome. If the executive was willing to do it, it would have been great. Clearly they are not doing it, and thus this Supreme Court had to intervene. So this article is कि in general it would have been a overreach of powers by the court or the judiciary, but as the executive has not been doing it, it is okay for them to do it. The more important editorial for us is a TRIPS waiver is useful but not a magic pill. So this is once again talking about that, see, the TRIPS waiver, which is about the second part of TRIPS agreement, which India and South Africa have called for, that the waiver should be granted. Now, it highlights that, see, this is not a magic pill, and already Western countries have limited the reach of it. India and South Africa had called for a waiver on all aid-related activities part of COVID-19. That is essential medicines, equipments, everything should be waived off. But US is only supported on vaccines. And in that regard also, even if a waiver is granted, if and when it is granted, the lesson is that it may not be the magic pill. Why it may not be the magic pill? Because to even manufacture the vaccines, one, you need manufacturing capability. Second, you need components to actually manufacture, and which may still be part of Western countries, or they need to supply that. Plus, apart from it is the technology that you need to manufacture those vaccines in the first place. And lastly is the logistical challenge. So for example, India may have got a lot of oxygen aid, but the total number of tankers it has to actually transfer that oxygen from one place to another is what is in short supply. So even if, let's say, you may be able to manufacture the vaccines, you may not be able to actually transport them. So those logistical things are also what the developing countries need to do. So the waiver may not be everything that is needed to actually tide over the COVID-19 pandemic. So the editorial draws an experience from the 2003 waiver. In 1990s, the HIV AIDS was a crisis in Africa. African countries were unable to manufacture it. It is then this waiver was used, and Indian manufacturing companies were able to manufacture these at a very cheap price and supply it to West African countries, which led to the crisis being overcome. And therefore, this waiver is then now being seen as once again a need of the world to tide over the pandemic. But the other problems that we have highlighted at this last paragraph is one that may not be all that needs to be there apart from the waiver also. All right, so even if we may get the waiver, there are other problems that are needed. The experience is that, see, this waiver is helpful, but it is of limited use unless other things are overcome. Excuse me. So then on the op-ed page, the changing nature of left in Kerala, this is talking about what left politics is about, how it has evolved. Then on the right hand side, a parody in the time of tragedy. This is the tragedy of India right now. Then on the left hand side, back in the storage shortage economy. So India, when in 1960s had a huge shortage of food grains for itself. It was it was literally dependent on Western countries for food grains of its own. In that regard, thus, we are now back in the same time. Foreign aid, for after 17 long years, India is basically boasting about the aid that it is getting from different places. The system basically is now more reliant on NGOs, foreign aid to tide over the pandemic. Our government has completely realized that this is now beyond their control, and every helping hand is actually welcomed, including that of China. Even our sworn enemies are willing to help us, and we are willing to take their assistance because we are in that dire situation. So this editorial then talks about that how, because of strong decisions that were taken by Lal Bahadur Shastri and then Indira Gandhi, about that, see, we need to overcome this. This is not a situation we can ever get back into, and that laid down the groundwork for the green revolution, which has now led to India being a food surplus on 2 to 3 times. So this calls that, see, we need to increase our health infrastructure so that never in the future we are reliant or dependent on anyone else for this. Then the data point talks about the overall vaccination pace. This has been slow, even when from January 16 we have been vaccinating people. Till now, only 40% of that population has received the COVID-19 vaccine, and in different states that proportion is even lower. So which shows that our vaccination pace needs to pick up pace. Then on the other side, here is India still reports 3.5 lakh new cases and 3,461 deaths. Remember, this is just after a Sunday. Testing goes down on Sundays. Then that FCRA amendments are crippling our work. NGOs have been calling, the cartoon on the op-ed page also talks about how FCRA amendments that were brought in last year are now crippling the work of NGOs who need assistance. As per them, one of the things that all NGOs had to do was to establish a bank account in Delhi, which could then receive the aid, and then from there everything could be diverted. In that regard, this NGOs are calling that this is a limitation that is stopping them from working at their peak pace, which is required for NGOs to do. This is something they told the panel, the NDMA. It needs to be seen if the government does anything to actually stop it. Then on the plan, the green panel allows the Great Nicobar plan to advance. This is related to the new port that the government of India wants to establish in the Great Nicobar Islands, removing one of the world's best tropical forest, protected tropical forest of the world, and also the area where the leatherback turtle is. So the Galathea Bay, where the Great Nicobar Island is. In this regard, a port, Niti Aayog wants a port to come up in this area. Now the Environmental Appraisal Committee has recommended this project for environmental impact assessments. So that is a compulsory thing. Based on the environmental impact assessment, it is seen whether the project should go ahead or not. Already environmentalists have called that this is something that India should not be doing. The environmental harms of this will be irreversible if this goes ahead. Then moving on the other news, more and more about the COVID-19 crisis. On the international news, the chief suspect of the attack on Maldivian ex-president has now been arrested. So the key suspect of Nasheed's attack has been arrested. Police say 3 of the 4 accused linked to the blast that injured the former president are already in its custody. And Mr. Nasheed is now out of intensive care, and in some time he'll be able to recover. He was the president of the country from 2008 to 2012. On the other side, what is more important for us, so we had talked about the Taiyuan launch that China has made. This rocket, debris from the rocket that launched it, that is the Long March 5B Y2 rocket, broke off, and generally what happens with rockets is these boosters then burnt up in the atmosphere, but this one got back to Earth and had landed in the Indian Ocean on the western coast of the Maldivian Islands. Okay, NASA has called that, see, this was failing to meet responsible standards. Each seafarer country has a responsibility to ensure that the space debris does not cause harm to the people on Earth. That nowhere should your experiments cause harm to others, and specifically the debris from space. So countries have to make sure that these do not land in any area. Last year, already, the Long March rocket, which was used to launch the Tianwen 1 program, which was the Mars mission, debris from that rocket had landed in Mongolia, even though people were not injured, but a lot of damage was done to the property. Now, fortunately, this landed in Indian Ocean. So NASA had claimed that, see, it is your responsibility. You have to be responsible undertaking your launches, that no human property is also damaged by this. You have to be in charge of your debris and be responsible enough in case you cause damage to restore it or pay damages to the country where you cause damage. China has claimed that, see, these are double standards, which is not exactly so. The incident that Chinese have cited, which is of a SpaceX rocket, that was a failed launch. So the company had wanted to launch in one way, the launch had gone against their plan, and thus it had fell in a field in Washington, but there they had paid back for the damages. China has claimed that, see, this was part of industrial hazard, it may happen. It is double standard. This is something that China always adopts. What becomes important for us is therefore in general that, see, this is something that should not be taking place. This puts the highlight once again on the space mission programs of China and the rocket that it has carried. All right, so this puts the news even more importantly. Okay, then moving on, amid weekend clashes, Israel vows to keep Jerusalem order. They have now claimed that, see, they will do something to protect it. Countries which had normalized relationship with Israel recently, that is UAE, Bahrain, Morocco and Sudan, have also condemned Israel's action because peaceful prayers, people who are praying in the Al-Aqsa Mosque were rounded about by the Israeli police and pushed out. This is something that has been criticized across the globe. This is part of the right-wing politicians of Israel who want or believe that Israel does not belong to Arabians and they should vacate the land as quickly as possible. Then moving on, apart from this, there is probably steps for peace in South Sudan that are taking place. So South Sudanian President Salva Kiir has now dissolved the parliament and has stated that as part of his 2018 peace accord, he will now induct people from the opposition side. It needs to be seen how this is done, and that's when we will keep a note of the event. On the sporting side, nothing of real note for us. So on that note, I'll conclude for the day. Once again, I'm telling you, all the candidates, that don't worry too much. Focus on the date of the examination as June 13 and keep on preparing. And we will continue with the series to keep yourself updated with any latest current affairs things. On that note, thank you so much. Take care, everyone, and register yourself for COVID and vaccines if you haven't already done so. So see you all tomorrow.